Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Adventure of the Stars podcast. How my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And as always, hit that subscribe button, everybody. An amazing show for you, because aboard the mothership is Renee Witterstaetter. You know her as the editor of She-Hulk, Guardians of the Galaxy, and the Jurassic Park comic books. She's also the founder of Ava Inc. Artist Group and Pros and Cons Celebrity Booking. Now come join me as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Miss Witterstaetter. Thanks so much for coming to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
Hey there, how you doing? You can call me Renee if you want to.
I'll go with Renee. I greatly appreciate the offer.
It's easier than Witterstaetter.
It does seem that way. I do appreciate. What kind of name is that, if you don't mind?
Well, it's Dutch. It's probably Dutch German. My ancestors did come from the Netherlands, but it's right on the border with Germany. So there's a little bit of everything mixed in there.
Oh, very cool. And like I said, it's a pleasure to finally talk with you. I feel like we've been working together through emails for some years now, and it's good to finally see you in person and say hello.
Hello. Yeah, you've done some great interviews with some of the people I represent. So yeah, now I am on the hot seat.
Yes, you are. And I'm sure it'll be just as good at these interviews. So I always start off with questions of inspiration. So what inspired your love of comics and who are your earliest influences?
Oh, wow. Okay, that is very good. My love of comics. Well, I've always loved storytelling. So I don't know if it actually started out as a love of comics. It started out as a love for storytelling because I was a big old movie buff when I was a kid, and I would sneak out of my bedroom at night and watch all the late movies. And when my parents were asleep and like sitting there with the volume really low, so nobody would know I was awake. I think my dad always knew I was awake, but he just pretended like he didn't know. And so I love storytelling, and I was always a voracious reader. So I just loved storytelling in all of its forms. And I think when I discovered comic books, that was amazing to me because it was a whole new type of storytelling that I had not been exposed to before, and that I was very excited to learn more about. Actually, I had two older brothers. So they were sort of the gateway for me to discover a lot of these things. When they weren't home, I would go into their room and like find all their comic books and read their books and put them back without them knowing. But some of the earliest ones I remember, the issue of Spider-Man where he meets Mary Jane, that one sticks out in my mind. It's like, wow, this is different. And some really wacky comics have stuck in my mind from when I was a kid, like the Jerry Lewis comics from DC. They were just, maybe because I was watching the old Jerry Lewis movies on TV, and I said, what? There are comic books too?
That's cool. Like, as a kid, my father was a comic book collector back in the 50s and 60s, and he still kept his collection. I remember as a kid, my father would show me his collection as he would price them and mark their conditions and stuff, and catalog them. I remember Jerry Lewis comics as being some of them too. And it's amazing which ones actually stick in your memory. Like, oh, I I remember these comics.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, what? He's a real person and he's a comic book character.
Yeah, I don't think I ever would imagine a real person would get their own comic book. I was like, how does that happen? He's a real guy. He can't possibly get his own comic.
Of course, I am a real person and also a comic book character too.
Oh, which comic book is this?
She-Hulk, of course.
Oh, I didn't know you appeared in She-Hulk.
Yes.
You edited, but I didn't know you appeared.
Yeah, Byrne drew me in as a character many times.
Oh, very cool. Then you must be in the TV show. How do they not put you in the cable TV show?
I might show up at some point. Maybe I will. I just think whoever they get to play me should have a Texan accent. That's all. That's my request. And at least a few pairs of cowboy boots.
How awesome was it to have? Do you have the comic book still that you're in?
Oh, yeah, sure. Of course. I have all the books I worked on. At least one copy.
That is absolutely awesome. How does it feel to be your own comic book character?
Well, it was really, it was surreal because I loved working with John, but I never knew when he was going to draw me in as a character. And he wouldn't put it in the script. I would get the script, we'd go over the script, we'd make changes, we'd brainstorm, and then he would do the art. And when he sent the art in, John did his own, he did everything. I mean, he did the pencils and the inks usually. So he would send the pages in and add things where I was a character. Like I would make guest appearances in the comic book, but he would not tell me that I was going to be a guest character until after it was too late for me to change it. But of course I wouldn't have, because it was fun and I was a complete accomplice in the whole thing. So
Oh, I think that's absolutely awesome. You're in continuity in Marvel officially.
yeah, probably, most likely. I think I am actually. I think last time I looked at the Marvel database, it lists the books I'm in as a character.
Oh my God, that is the coolest thing I think I've ever heard.
Oh, I always joke too, is, John was pretty good about putting me in clothes that I actually had.
Yeah.
So my comic book, the version of me dresses the way that I used to dress back then with cowboy boots and dresses with cowboy boots and I loved cowboy boots because they were comfortable and just fun. But also he gave me this big penthouse office, which was a corner office with these big palatial, windows and people bringing me coffee on a tray in the morning. That part was not a reality. I wish it was, but it wasn't. When I was editing She-Hulk, Marie Javins and I were sharing an office, and we like to call it the dungeon. That's what everybody called it. It was the dungeon. There were 3 offices down there. Myself, Kelly Cravisi, Marie and I shared an office, and then Hildy Mesnick was down there for a while. And there were no windows. It was just this little square area with these partitioned offices, and nobody ever came down there. It was not on the same floor with the other offices. And it was just like we were in our own little world down there. We really some days didn't see anybody else. And Marie and I even had a pet rat in a cage. It wasn't a wild rat, it was a domesticated rat. And we had the rat in the office, and that one's name was Cleo, I believe. And so we had Cleo down there, and we had our own rat, and we didn't ask anyone if we could have a rat. We just had one. And and one day Tom DeFalco came down there, and we were all just like, oh my God, Tom's here. It's like we didn't even know anyone knew we were here. But it was kind of fun. But no, I did not have the big penthouse office and my coffee delivered to me in the morning on a tray. So just so you know, folks, that with comic books, we can make anything a reality.
That's so good point. So not real, She-Hulk, not real, a nice office for you. Those are the 2 things. Proof a comic book's being fictional.
Clothes were real though.
Clothes
were real. Yeah, John did give me the accurate clothes for the paper doll version of me someday.
I think that's really interesting because when people watch the Disney She-Hulk TV show, people comment a lot about how she breaks the fourth wall a lot. But your comic books were apparently doing it way earlier than the TV shows, and apparently earlier than Deadpool was doing it.
Oh yeah, no, we were doing it in She-Hulk long before Deadpool. Long. I think John may have been the first one that was doing that. And then of course they continued it with Deadpool. I think Gail Simone was doing it first, actually. With Deadpool. And but I really do think we were the forerunner of that, or at least John was. And he had a really good sense of humor, and we just had such a fun time putting those books together. So to see it being made into a TV show now is surreal, but it's rewarding. And it's just fun to know that things you worked on so long ago are having a new fan base, a new generation, new fans finding it and enjoying it. But I had that experience with Guardians of the Galaxy and Thanos Quest too, because I also worked on those books. And to see them being made into the properties that they were has also been a great deal of fun, even though they're a lot different than the original source material in some cases, especially with Guardians. There's still enough of it that it's fun to look at and see what they kept and what they didn't.
Well, I mean, you've had a very legendary career as an editor. I mean, you worked on, from what I saw, Superman, Jurassic Park, as we already said, She-Hulk. I mean, you've done so many big comic books and so many properties over the course of your career that is extremely impressive. So because you have that experience as the editor, what insights does that provide about the industry, story construction, working with comic book professionals? What kind of insights into that did it give you, having that great background as editor on so many different titles?
Well, every title is different. Every title has different needs. So when I would get a project, well, Jurassic Park was one that I spearheaded because I wanted to get that book and I wanted to turn it into a comic book. I read the novel, I loved it. It was
Mm.
before there was a movie, before anything happened, and I said, we have to get the rights for this. I was still at Marvel at that time, but I was about to leave Marvel. And then I went to Topps Comics, and then over at Topps Comics, we were able to get the rights and do the comic book. So, but every book is different. Whether it's Jurassic Park, whether it's Hercules, Xena, X-Files, all the media books I worked on like that, James Bond I worked on, the Golden Eye comic books, and then Zorro for the movie. And also we did Dracula versus Zorro, and we did the Lone Ranger. So we did a lot of media stuff. But each one's different. So the fun part of it is putting the team together, finding the writer that you think would have the sensibilities that you're looking for, finding the artist who has the style that you're looking for that particular project, and just making that work. And I always loved putting the teams together and just finding that perfect little bit of alchemy that produced this product, this project that other people could enjoy.
So when you spearheaded the Jurassic Park comic book, and Jurassic Park is one of my favorite properties of all time. The book is probably my favorite book. The movie is my favorite movie. I mean, I'm a Jurassic Park nerd on some level, and I have all the comic books from Topps, because you can't love the movie and not have bought the comic books as well, and the books.
Well, thank you.
So and I thought they were incredible. So in the Jurassic Park comic book, one thing I was kind of surprised about was that because they made several of them. In Jurassic Park, they made some sequels. I think there was like Raptor Attacks and Raptor and a few others.
Yeah.
So I was surprised. So in the sequel, they showed, I believe, Ian Malcolm still alive directly from the book. Now, can you kind of go through some of the decision process in how you decided to develop the comic books post movie, and were you in consultation with Crichton or Spielberg, or was it internal decisions, that kind of thing?
Sure. Well, for the movie adaptation, of course, we tried to stick to the movie script. Whenever you do a movie adaptation, you get the script of the movie. You have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, of course, but we get the script, it's sent to the writer. The writer breaks it down into comic book form. And while I always say that a comic book is like a movie on paper, there are differences that you have to take into account when you're taking a movie script and making it into a comic book. We can't sometimes put everything in, so you have to make decisions about what the storytelling is going to be. After the movie, we still had the license to create new stories. So I don't believe Spielberg had anything to do with that. But we did deal with the people who own the Jurassic Park property, the comic books. And, I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll have to ask Salicrup about that, who was our editor-in-chief. Jim Salicrup was our editor-in-chief at Topps. Spielberg might have had some approval over the approval process, but one thing is for sure, we did have to send all the pages to the actors and get their likeness approvals.
Oh, wow.
And if they didn't like something, then of course we had to change it. That didn't happen too often. I think when I was working on Zorro, Antonio Banderas asked for a few changes, but overall, we were pretty good with making the actors happy too.
I was saying, actually, I was thinking the scene that pops in my brain was Robert Muldoon was the one I was thinking about, that was killed in the movie, brought back in the comic book.
Yes.
And I think and I still remember the line, which is funny because I read the comic book maybe 20 years ago, was that we were evenly matched. He said, yes. He goes, how do you say? He goes, we were evenly matched. And I thought to myself, that is pretty cool. And the fact that he didn't show up ever again, I was like, damn it, that was an opportunity right there.
Right. Well, he was such a great character. I kind of hated to see him die in the movie just because he was such a cool character.
I
but in comic books, you can do anything. So
I agree 100%. I mean, the character in the Lost World movie, the bad guy that they showed, felt like they were, that was a spot in there somewhere for Muldoon to have shown up in somewhere in that capacity if they wanted to. I was like, damn it.
They could have. Definitely.
But that was awesome. Like I said, I remember just in devouring the Jurassic Park stuff, especially like I said Raptor Attack, and later on my wife got into the into Jurassic Park. Right.
So I always hired Michael Golden to do most of the covers. just because I so much loved his dinosaur work. I think he's one of
Hmm.
the best dinosaur artists. And I hired him to do so many of my covers and still do as an editor. And his attention to detail and just the little things he puts in that you have to look for. I just think his Jurassic Park covers were brilliant.
I really do think so as well. I mean, I was like I said, I just remember being very excited by all that, and the X Files as well. I remember reading the X Files as well, and I try to remember if it was in a Star Wars Galaxy magazine or Jurassic Park where they had the preview for the X Files comic book inside. It was like the black and white version of it.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it was
can't.
the first time. I can't remember. There was a word for the small black and white ash can. It was the very first time I ever saw an ash can comic book.
Yes,
Was
yes.
on X Files. I thought that was absolutely incredible.
X-Files was fun. I love that series too, because we could do just such different things with it. You know, we always had very different covers on that. Mariah Kim did a lot of our covers for that.
Now, was there ever issues of continuity with the X Files TV show that made sure that things meshed properly?
No, because a lot of the stories were standalone stories and
Hmm.
they didn't really take into account the continuity of the TV show. We did have to, of course, get the scripts approved. And once again, the actors' likenesses all had to be approved. But otherwise, no, we didn't have to follow any series continuity. As long as we didn't kill the characters off. Yeah, it was
Which was a
okay.
good decision. I must admit, X Files is one of those comic books and shows that years later, because they brought back X Files a couple of times. I was surprised they never tried bringing back the comic book as well.
I know.
And it seemed like that was something that was destined to happen at some point.
It may still, you never know. It definitely has a big following still. People still love X-Files.
Because is it still owned by the Topps company at the time for the comic book rights?
No, no, I'm sure those rights have long expired. But of course, I haven't worked at Topps in a long
Hmm.
time. So I haven't worked at Topps for over 20 years now. So they don't even do comic books anymore. When I left them, they were not doing comic books anymore. So usually rights for something only last for a certain period of time.
Hmm. Well, I mean, you've since created or formed Ava Inc. Artist Group and the Pro and Con Celebrity Booking, which once again has helped me many times with getting good guests. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. So, does your dealings with artists and creators as an editor, did it help you understand what they want now as your client now that you have the artist group and celebrity booking company?
Well, I think as an editor, I was trained as a journalist before I became a comic book editor. And I found that the skills that I learned as a journalist and used as a journalist could also benefit me as an editor. You have to tell good, clear stories. You have to put together a product that people can understand and that gets across the message that you were trying to convey. You have to always answer those questions: who, what, why, when, how, and where. If your story doesn't answer those questions, you're not doing your job if you leave any of those things unanswered for people. And then those same edicts of good storytelling also benefited me when I was in the movie industry as a production person. And then also as an agent, because it does help to know what an editor is looking for when I'm contracting my artists to do different projects. If an editor comes to me and if there is an issue, which most of the time there's not, because I usually only work with really professional people.
Mm.
But if there is ever an issue, of course I understand what they're talking about because I've been there myself. And I've art corrected and art directed, and I've colored comic books, and I've written books. And so I'm coming at it from a viewpoint of having done these things myself. So any skill you have like that you've used and that you've learned, it can be implemented in different ways. And those are skills that I had to learn when I got into the industry. Yes, I came from this journalistic background, but when Mike Carlin hired me as the assistant editor on the Superman books, I was very green as far as comic books were concerned. I really knew nothing about comic books, and he had to teach me everything. And I was just you know a lab experiment in a way. I mean, I knew nothing. So I was just like, let's see if we can teach this person. And much to his credit, he did. And from there, I went to Marvel, then to Topps, and then I started my own publishing company and did film production. And I've been an agent now for many years, like you said. As far as working with my actors, that's also beneficial because there are certain instances with some of my actors where they will want me to read scripts, or they will have film ideas of their own, and I'm able to read them and give them ideas or input on the story and from a storytelling viewpoint, because once again, all those elements have to be there, whether it's a movie, a comic book, a book, I mean, whatever type of entertainment package that you're putting together. One of the things I really tried to learn the skills of and hone the skills would be to read something and find where the holes are. Find the things that need to be shored up, find the things that we can improve. And so I do work with some of my actors on that. And I'm also hired a lot to do script doctoring or, script troubleshooting for comic books and sometimes for film.
I mean, your group of clients is very impressive. I mean, you have legendary Jim Shooter as one, Michael Golden. A lot of the people from the Aliens movies, which is one of the best movies ever done, is under your client list. I believe, is Rags Morales still in your one of your clients still?
Yes, I still
Rags Morales, who I have on my wall, one of his autographs from Our Man on my wall.
I also have Arthur Sudam, the Zombie King.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very impressive bullpen of talent that you have as clients. Now, when you're determining who to accept as clients, what is your rubric for who you're choosing as or accepting as your client?
That's a good question. I look for someone who is very professional, someone that has proven themselves in the industry. All the people that I rep have a long list of books that they've done that they've excelled at. I mean, you look at Arthur Sudam, and really, he was the forerunner of bringing fine art instincts into comic books with his painted covers. And then through his zombie work, through Marvel Zombies, that's really took zombies to a whole new level. Before that book is really, started some of the craze that actually got The Walking Dead on TV. So, these guys all have wonderful pedigrees, and it makes them very easy to book. But on top of that, they have to be very professional. I want people that I can send to shows, even if I'm not going to be there. And I know they're going to show up for work. I know they're going to engage with the fans. I know that they're going to do what the convention promoter needs them to do, because I look at the convention promoters as my business partners too. We're partnering to make this experience for the fans. And if everyone does their part, it all works out, to be wonderful. So, people like Michael Golden and Arthur and Jim Shooter and, the other people that I work with. I mean, we can name them all if you like, because they're all wonderful. Rodney Ramos is very professional as well. I mean, they're all just, really cool people. And so I'm very picky about who I work with, because this is how I spend my life. And these are the people that I am around. So, I'm in the position of having it be people that I like to spend time with. Why would you purposely choose to be around people who are unprofessional or rude or don't show up for work? And I have had those experiences, and I tend not to work with them for very long, because if someone causes me too much stress and too many sleepless nights, it's not really worth it to me in the long run.
No, that totally makes sense. So when you're determining which conventions that best serve the expectations of your clients, what are you then looking for in the convention itself? Which type of conventions you feel work best?
Well, I think every type of convention has something great about it. The larger conventions that have media guests, of course, are great for my actors. That it's also great for my artists that have media tie-ins, which most of them do. Without people like Michael Golden and Arthur Sudan, the actors wouldn't have some of these properties, and they wouldn't have the words to say. So, they're media guests in their own right. They are, celebrity artists. So these big shows are good because you get a cross pollination from different types of pop culture all coming together in one spot. So I do love the energy of those shows. And then the smaller shows, the medium shows and the smaller shows also have a lot of great things to be said about them. A lot of times you have a chance to talk to the fans longer than you might at a bigger show, to interact with people more, to do some things that you might not have time to do at bigger shows. And also get to parts of the country that aren't serviced by a larger convention. And I love going to all parts of the world and all parts of the US and meeting fans that we haven't met yet. So those shows are great for that.
Like I said, I had the great pleasure of meeting a lot of your clients at the shows. Rhode Island Comic Con, regularly you've been there. I think it's the first time I met Mr. Shooter, Springfield Comic Con as well with Mr. Shooter.
Sure.
With all these conventions that you're a part of and all these clients that you're working with, I imagine the organizational difficulties of all that must be insane. I mean, how have you gotten things, have you organized things so you can keep everything straight and keep sure everything is taken care of and all your clients are happy?
Well, I have to write everything down. I have to make a to-do list for myself every day. I have to update my list all the time. I have to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. Sometimes I do hire assistants. Things are picking up a lot right now. So, I probably will hire an assistant to help me with some logistics. And so it's just a matter of trying to make sure things don't fall through the cracks, trying to make sure people have all the information they both the convention and the talent. So it is a lot of work. And I do hire people to help me sometimes with travel logistics or research logistics. Things like that do come up that I might need some help with. But it's a lot of multitasking, which I think every job I've had has required me to multitask. It's just something I do without even thinking about it, whether it was being a journalist or an assistant editor or an editor, or especially working in film production. When you're working in film production, you're doing anything and everything for that 12 to 14 hours that you're on a movie set. And if you don't know how to do it, you're going to learn how to do it. And so I think that really drove into me the work ethic that I have now. In fact, I think every job has, but being in film production will teach you to multitask very, very quickly.
Well, you have a very exciting event coming up on October 5th at the probably gonna pronounce it wrong, Francis Tavern Museum.
Francis, yes.
Francis, was I close? Hopefully I was.
It's FRAUNCES Tavern Museum. Yes, Francis.
So the event centers around your book, Cloak Crusader, George Washington Comics and Pop Culture. So can you tell our listeners a little about this book and what inspired its creation?
Sure, of course. Yeah, talk about multitasking. Not only have I been running Eva Inc. Artist Group and Pros and Cons Celebrity Booking, but I decided to write another book. And then I also decided to put on a gallery show. I didn't have enough to do.
As long as you're staying busy, that's what's important.
Oh my God. I don't have a lot of time to sleep these days. So how did it happen? That's always a good question. For me, I'm always trying to look for my next book idea. And I've written several books that I'm very proud of, including Dying for Action, The Life and Films of Jackie Chan. That one was published by Warner Books. My Spartan X comic book series that I co-created with Michael Golden, where that was a floppy, that was like a comic book series, and now we're making it into a trade. And one of my books that I was very proud of was Nick Carty, The Artist at War, which was a book of all of Nick's army sketches that he actually did while he was over in Germany and Belgium during the war. And like anything, you look like, if you, I'm in the unique position, and I think most writers are, to write something that interests you or that you care about. So like with the Nick Carty book, that book came about because I was at Nick's house in Sarasota, and he started showing me this little binder of sketches that he did during World War II. And I said, Nick, I've got to do a book on this. This is amazing. And the first thing he said to me was like, "What, do you think anybody would want to read it?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, Nick, I want to read it. So if I want to read it, somebody else is going to want to read it too."
Yeah.
So I kind of write books that I want to read, and then hoping that other people will want to read it too. And it was that way when I used to write my columns in comic books. People come up to me at shows and they say, "Well, I always felt like I knew you because I would always read your columns that you wrote in the comic books, and they were always very personal. And I felt like you were reaching out to me and actually speaking to me." And I said, "Well, I'm really glad, because that's what I wanted it to sound like, because to me, that was me trying to communicate with you back in the time before we had the internet. You know, my editor's column was the way that I would tell you about me, or tell you what I felt about the things that were important to me." And so now when I write a book, I'm in the unique position of writing those books, like I said, that I want to read. So the George Washington book came around several ways. Of course, you know, I rep Mark Ralston, who played Judge Shippen on the TV series Turn, of course, which is about the Revolutionary War. And I love the series. I thought it was fantastic. And then around, I don't even know when I saw it for the first time, but then that was always in my mind. And then my nephew, Brennan Witterstaetter, during one of the Chicago shows, we saw that Hamilton was playing in Chicago. He says, "Oh, let's go see Hamilton." And I'd never seen it before. He had. So I went to see Hamilton, and I absolutely fell in love with the musical. And so I was always very intrigued of portrayals of George Washington in pop culture. So somehow this idea started to form in my mind to do this book, because the more I didn't really connect it to comic books yet. And that that happened when I was having a discussion with Michael Golden one night at a show, and he was going, "Well, you know, Batman supposedly had ties to the Revolutionary War." And Graham Nolan was telling me that he was inspired by Revolutionary War costumes for one of his Hawkworld books. So I was thinking, wow, I wonder how many Revolutionary War ties there actually are in comic books. So I started looking it up and researching it, and I started finding hundreds of appearances of George Washington in comic books. And that turned into like over 1,000 appearances in George Washington in comic books. And I was going, wow. And then I started looking at how he was portrayed different ways in different decades, and how it evolved, and how he continued to be an evolving part of our pop culture over, over the last, 150 years. And of course, even before that, because even in George Washington's time, he was still a part of pop culture. You know, if you wanted people to know that you supported George Washington and that you were a big fan of what the guy was doing, you put him on your tavern sign. Or you somehow had his image somehow associated with your business. And that was a shorthand to let people know that you were on that side and that you respected this guy, or that, you know, the metaphor of what he was fully conveyed by that one image. And that continued. There was a time in the United States, especially leading up to the 150th anniversary of his inauguration, where every household, practically every household in the United States, had some portrait of George Washington in their house. It was almost like England, people in England had pictures of the king or queen. And I'm so sad about Queen Elizabeth. She was such an amazing person. God bless her. But everyone had a picture of Washington in their house. And as time went on, we still do. It has just evolved into different types of art or different types of ideals. He's on our TV, he's in our comic books. He is still a very much a part of our pop culture. So what I decided to do with the exhibit is to go through the decades. And what I also found out was that 2022 is actually the 100th anniversary of the first monthly comic book. It was published in 1922. A lot of people think the first comic book was The Yellow Kid, which was published in like 1897, I think. I'm not exactly sure on the date, but it was before 1900. And The Yellow Kid was the first book that actually had the word comic book on it. It was on the back cover, but it was not a monthly comic book. So the first monthly comic book as we know it was called Comics Monthly, very creative. And it was published by, I think, King Features, and it came out in 1922. So our opening of this gallery show is also a celebration of 100 years of the monthly comic book. So I start off with talking about what pop culture is in the exhibit and how George Washington was a part of that pop culture from very early on, whether it's a tavern sign, going through time, and even to the beautiful Leyendecker paintings of Rockwell that were done for the Saturday Evening Post, and the Norman Rockwell Boy Scout paintings that he did for the Boy Scouts, and then going on to how that happened in comic books. And the first appearances of George Washington in comic books were of course historical presentations of actual events, that would talk about his exploits, whether it be crossing the Delaware or Valley Forge or giving up power by not seeking a third term, which was really like, who does that? It's like, you have complete power right here. Everyone loves you. They want you to remain in power. You can become emperor. But he's like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to go back to Mount Vernon, and I'm going to let the power go to someone else because that's what we fought for. I mean, who does that?
Right.
I know. It's like every comic book you read has a hero and a villain, and the villain, their whole goal, the whole thing they want is absolute power.
Right.
What they crave is what they want. And here is George Washington, and he is presented in real life with this opportunity for absolute power, and he turns it down. So he's really like the superhero of his own story.
Right.
I like to say he really is, if you think about it, one of our first superheroes. And so the first appearances of him in comic books are historical representations. Now that started shifting in the 1940s. Of course, in the 40s and during both world wars, his image was called upon a lot to instill patriotism, to rally the troops, to remind people what they were fighting for. So there were those historical books still being done. But at the same time, we started to see time travel stories with characters like Kid Eternity, going back into time and bringing George to the future to help him with something. And I really love those because you have this really buff George Washington, like he like was plucked out of Valley Forge and coming to 1940s and like punching out gangsters. It's like, it's hilarious. I love it. It just reminds you that George Washington wasn't always this elder statesman that we see in some of the older representations of him after he was already president. He was once a pretty formidable guy, and with the fisticuffs. And so I love those stories. So the time travel stories to the present, whatever that present might be, And then also you started seeing time travel stories where characters were going back in time to the Revolutionary War and helping George Washington out without him knowing about it. Superman did that quite a bit.
Really?
Yeah, there's several time travel stories with Superman, Superboy actually, and Jimmy Olsen goes back in time and is at Valley Forge, I believe, and Supergirl goes back in time and actually helps Betsy. She goes back and is like observing like the whole making of the star, the flag with the round stars, and the flag gets destroyed. But like somehow Supergirl gets it and repairs it just in time.
Thank God for Supergirl.
Thank God. And then Crypto goes back in time and Washington's crossing the Delaware and he's about to hit an iceberg. And Crypto like blasts it somehow and breaks up the iceberg, saving Washington just in the nick of time.
Nice.
Otherwise, there would be no United States without Crypto.
Good dog.
I know, good dog. So I mean, there's all kinds of stories like that, and a lot of superheroes supposedly helped Washington cross the Delaware. I mean, there's it's a reoccurring thing.
Right.
You know, I love it though. So we delve into those superhero stories a little bit. We talk about the Revolutionary War aspect of Batman's history because supposedly his ancestor was Anthony Wayne, who was a real person and a real general, and that is something Bill Finger talked about, that was who he named Bruce Wayne after. I think it was Robert the Bruce and Bruce Wayne. And then we get into some of the Marvel stuff because Marvel did some time travel stories too. The first appearance of Washington in Marvel, though, was not a time travel story. It was a book called Blonde Phantom #1, and it was a flashback. They would eventually get into the time travel stories, but they were later doing it than DC was. And the Fantastic Four went back in time and broke Washington out of jail. And you know, the Marvel books always included usually some sort of time travel device, and the DC books included more just like Superboy and Supergirl somehow having the ability to go back in time. And they never quite explained it. You would just have like the graph of years and somehow they could super speed back. I don't know. I wish I had that ability. If I could, I would love to speed back through time, go visit some people and, you know, drop in for tea or something. I know. And also Archie did a lot of time travel stories. And so you have Archie and Jughead and some of the other characters going back in time. They don't have superpowers, but somehow they still end up back in time. I think Archie hits his head somehow and he ends up back in time with one time with Roosevelt, then with Lincoln, and then with Washington. So all it took for him was to be hit on the head with a statue. Do not try that at home, kids. I don't know if it works.
Hopefully you never find out.
If I do it and it works, I'll let you know. So yeah, and I'm not sure they really influenced anything, except to like go to Valley Forge and Jughead like assures Washington he's going to win, and they're more like cheerleaders. It's like, you're going to win. It's like Washington's going, you know, you're crazy, and why are you dressed so weird? And he goes, oh, I'm from the future. It's like, yeah, right. It goes, really, and he shows him a dollar bill to prove that he's from the future. It's like, look, in the future, you're on our money. So, you know, it's just they're very different kind of stories, and it's just like everybody at all the characters at one point in time wanted to go back and visit Washington. We also look at, in one of the sections in the gallery show, we also look at how Washington was portrayed in sequential art let's say, over in England, because of course, he was the opposing side. But what people need to remember is that we were all British subjects back then. We were British fighting other British that, wanted to change the status quo. And there was actually a great deal of respect for Washington over in England, even during the war.
Oh, yeah?
And yeah. And I mean, if you read the London papers from that time, they are saying like very, very glowing things about Washington. It's very odd. And when he passed away in 1799, 98, I can't remember exactly. When he passed away, 1799, the London papers were saying this was a man of virtue and integrity and a modern day Cincinnatus. And for those that may not know who Cincinnatus is, he was a Roman leader who aided his country in a time of war. And then when the conflict was over, he gave up power. So they always like to say that Washington is a modern day Cincinnatus, which he is. But they were saying these glowing things in the papers. And there were American sailors in London when he passed. And they had a huge memorial service for Washington in London that all the American sailors that were in London could attend. So this was not that long after the Revolution. So this man was wildly respected, and that has continued even to this day. And of course, the United Kingdom is one of our strongest allies. And one of those things that really binds us together is our shared pop culture. And Washington, was and is a large part of that. You look at Queen Elizabeth II, who just passed away. I mean, she was probably one of my favorite people. I just admired her. I thought she had a great deal of integrity, a great deal of steadfastness. And even though I wasn't British, I'm not British, I still admired her greatly and, felt the loss when she passed away. It was, a somber day for me. And I feel that there were people during Washington's time that felt that way about him. He was not their leader. He was the president of the United States, but they could look at who he was and what he stood for and what he was trying to do, and they could respect him. So, that respect, I think, continued through the years for a very long time, and I think it still does to this day. In the United States, like I say, I think it has, and across the world, as time goes by, things evolve, and the pop culture that is infused with these people changes. But even if you look at things like we have like Funko Pops, there are Funko Pops of George Washington. There are certain historical figures that transcend time, that are completely recognizable, and they become a shorthand for something when we see an image of that person. Like we see an image of George Washington, and there are certain things that come to mind. We'll see pictures of Queen Elizabeth. There are certain things that will come to mind. They become pop culture metaphors. And anyone that's working in a creative endeavor will take that metaphor and use it as a shorthand to convey things in what they are trying to create, because it's immediate. Like I said, if you have George Washington on your tavern sign, that is a shorthand that tells somebody who sees that sign so much about your establishment before they ever walk in the door. So yeah, so we talk a lot about pop culture. We talk a lot about comic books. We have a whole section on the bicentennial furor that erupted probably a whole 10 years before 1976 even happened. It was like an avalanche of bicentennial and George Washington product during that time.
It's kind of funny. It kind of reminds me of shortly after I think Barack Obama got elected president, how he was being posted on the covers of like Amazing Spider-Man, a bunch of other comic books, as a way of kind of hero worshiping our leaders, like current leader. And I imagine that was, and I always thought to myself, wow, that's such a weird thing. I've never seen something like that before. But apparently that wasn't as unique of a thing as I had thought.
Well, it started with Washington, and I think there are probably more comic book appearances of Washington than any other president.
Hmm.
Lincoln is very close. I'm still doing my Lincoln research, but I'm venturing to guess at this point that Washington may still be the forerunner. I will let you know. But in our gallery show, we're doing a lot of really fun things. I'm going to have original art on display. Well, first of all, we have tons of rare comic books. Books that are extremely hard to find. I've been spending like a year finding these books, starting from the 1920s to the present. As you can imagine, the ones from the 1920s are hard to find. Even the ones from the 40s are hard to find because a lot of books did not survive the paper drives. So, if you like rare books and really fun, crazy art, we got all that. And then we do have a lot of wonderful originals on display. We have an Arthur Sudan painting, which is stunning. And we have several Michael Golden originals. We have a pop culture piece by Daniel Scott Jr., which I think is going to blow people away. I have George Perez. I have George Evans, Jose Marzan. It's going to be a combination of rare books and original comic books. I mean, original art and rare books.
I mean, it sounds really. No, but I mean, but it sounds awesome. There's also a reception October the 5th, which there's gonna be a silent auction, live sketching. I read remarks from Jim Shooter. So what part of this whole thing are you most excited about experiencing?
Well, let me tell you exactly what we're going to do. It is October 5th. The reason we picked that date is because it is the day before New York Comic Con starts. So if anyone lives in New York, if you're coming into town for the convention, we hope you will come and visit us that night, October 5th. The reception is from 6 to 8. There is an admission. It's $25. That includes open bar. It includes hors d'oeuvres, some really nice hors d'oeuvres. But in addition to that, you're going to get a signed print by either Michael Golden or Arthur Sudan. You are going to be there for the opening remarks with Jim Shooter. You can take part in the silent auction. We'll have rare books and other artifacts that you can bid on. We're going to have a sketch artist there. You can, have yourself done with a tri-corner hat if you want. What else are we going to do? Oh yeah, Jim's giving his remarks. Jim is such a pleasure to listen to. If you've never been to any of Jim's lectures, he's such a comic book historian. And we're also going to have Demetrius Angelo there. And Demetrius is putting together a virtual gallery room for us in the metaverse. And he will have headsets there, and you can actually walk into our virtual gallery and see items that are not in our physical room. So, like I said, there's so much George Washington material that I have some of it in our physical room, but you can explore our virtual gallery as well. So we're doing all of that. I'm sure I'm leaving something out, but then we're going to have a VIP dinner after that from 8 to 10. It is $149, I think, but that also includes the reception, also includes a 3-course dinner with beverage. And you also get another signed print. If you didn't get the Arthur Sudan print, you'll get that one. If you didn't get the Michael Golden print, you'll get that one. And you get a goodie bag that has some really cool stuff in it, including a signed comic book. And for anyone that does want to get signatures from Jim Shooter, if you are attending the dinner, you may also bring up to 15 books for Jim to sign. Which is really, really a good deal, because at New York Comic Con, his signature fee is like $25 to $30. So this is all to benefit the museum. But it is also going to be a really fun night, with beautiful books and beautiful art. And it is the Fraunces Tavern Museum. So let me tell you a little bit about that so you can understand the George Washington connection. Like I said, Fraunces is spelled Fraunces. Tavernmuseum.org actually is the website. And that is the building. It is the oldest tavern in New York. It predates the Revolutionary War. It it is still the same building. It is owned by the Sons of the American Revolution. George Washington had his farewell dinner with his officers after the Revolutionary War in this building.
Oh, very cool.
Yes, on the second floor. The dining room is still there. You can still see it. You can be in the room where that happened. And it's just amazing to realize that George Washington walked in these halls. So I like to say, that now we are welcoming back the comic book version of George. So, and he's going to be all over the place. Yeah, but guys, it's just such an amazing place. And when you come to this exhibit, you are supporting a wonderful historic, not only New York landmark, but I think a cultural landmark for the United States and even the world, because like I said, the pop culture significance of George Washington spreads far beyond the borders of the United States. He's an iconic image, and it's like we're just trying to show why and how, and the fact that he's been co-starring with superheroes in comic books for some time. You just didn't know it.
Right. So
my book will be out by next year. So this is also kind of a pre-launch for my book so that people are aware of it. But that's kind of a secondary thing. My goal with this gallery show is to have a fun evening with people that love art, people that love comics, people that love history, and also to support this great landmark.
So how long does the exhibition last for? I mean, after October 5th, is still going to be there for people to see, or is it a one-day thing?
Oh, no, my gosh. If this was a one-day thing, it's like, it's like all the time that we have spent putting this together. You have no idea. It's going to be up for about 2 years, leading up to the 250th anniversary of the United States, which is in 2026. And then at that point, it will probably be dismantled, and we'll put up a new exhibit for that anniversary. So if you're going to be visiting New York anytime within the next year and a half, or maybe a little longer, you can still come and see the gallery show. You just won't see Jim Shooter, Arthur Sudam, Michael Golden, or myself there most likely, unless you call me and say, hey, I'm going to be there, and who knows, I might drop in.
Well, it sounds absolutely awesome. Like I said, if there's any links that I can put up for people to buy tickets to it, please let me know, and I'll add it to the show notes for the YouTube and the webpage. It's like I said, it sounds absolutely fantastic. And like I said, having the pleasure of meeting Michael Golden and Jim Shooter and them, I can definitely say people will be in for a treat, I think.
Oh, it's going to be fun. I really hope if you're in town, you'll come to it. It's a celebration. So it's, even if you don't know that much about George Washington, it's still going to be a lot of fun because the art is amazing. We look at the evolution, like I said, of the monthly comic book over the last 100 years through this as well. And it's just going to be a nice evening and a way to kick off New York Comic Con. And it is francistavernmuseum.org. I will also email that to you so you can add that link.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Renee, for talking to me. It's been a great pleasure. And I hope our listeners go visit the museum October 5th.
Thank you. It's been very nice talking to you too.